I
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Spin Rack. We are talking about Shang-Chi and his origins and how Marvel has changed some of the origins that some people perceived as being not racist in certain ways. So one of the big characters that has been changed over time has been Fu Manchu, where they decided, Marvel decided to ditch the name of that character and has made the father of Shang-Chi the Mandarin, which in and of itself has caused some other controversies. But here, I'm here with the boys, Petey and Cal. Hey, gentlemen, let's talk about this. I'm going to start off with Petey himself. What's your take on this article that was dropped by Inverse itself, where they discuss some of Shang-Chi's origin?
pass it here, Pete. Pass it here, Pete.
I'll pass. I will actually this time. I will pass it.
No. We don't pass like that. That's not how it works, bro. It doesn't. I don't just pass it to one person. You pass it over to somebody else. That's not rocking. That's not how it goes. Okay.
I would say. All right. I'll say something. It's some BS. This article right here is some BS. Inverse. They got somebody don't know the actual. I mean, they know their history of stuff, of timeline stuff, but what's the name? Shang-Chi is a character that's a positive character. He fought against a villain, which was the Fu Manchu character, but he's a positive character. So they didn't have to destroy. He was the character that they licensed, Fu Manchu, but they had a hero. So they didn't have a offensive character. They had a character that people like kids wanted to be. That sort of thing carried on the tradition of Bruce Lee. So there's the racist origins of whatever with Fu Manchu. The success of those things led to the Marvel creating a positive character fighting. So it's like, if you look at the back and forth, at the end of the day, what Marvel created was a positive Asian character. Passing it to Cal.
All right. The title itself is misleading, that Shang-Chi had racist origins. No, Shang-Chi doesn't have racist origins, because Petey already said Shang-Chi's origins were what? Bruce Lee. You have the Kung Fu craze, and everybody wanted to capitalize on it. DC had their own in terms of, DC had I Ching, DC had Richard Dragon. Marvel, however, went after the television series Kung Fu. They were trying to get that. Okay, they were trying to get that. They couldn't get the rights to Kung Fu. Now, mind you, okay, that would have been the story with David Carradine's character, who was supposed to be half Chinese and looked 100% Caucasian. So I don't know what they would, so they couldn't get the rights to that, but they could get the rights to Fu Manchu. Now, they didn't do a Fu Manchu story. They said, no, okay, let's come up with something connected to Fu Manchu that we can work with. And Fu Manchu would definitely be the guy who could help us sell this. But they created Shang-Chi, who was what? Son of Fu Manchu, trained, and eventually is brought back by Fu Manchu to be back in the fold. And he was going to help him take out, the world and do all this stuff. And Shang-Chi was like, no, I'm not doing it. And for the next 125 issues, Shang-Chi is Fu Manchu's greatest opponent, towards him realizing his evil plans, if you will. The problem that these guys have is the depiction. Okay, this is the same reason why they're going and canceling Dr. Seuss books. They have a problem with the depiction of Fu Manchu, going back like almost 100 years ago, in comparison to what we would depict now. Right? And again, rightfully so. There's a whole bunch of depictions, be they cultural, racial, okay, social, that don't hold up over the test of time, okay, and that are stock versions, okay, stock versions of what we would expect what somebody would look like in the film. If you were Chinese, Japanese, pretty much it was the same thing. They would have this cap on their head, their hair would be in that long braided queue, okay, the robes, the mustache, all of this type of stuff. But the bigger complaint is that most of the time that the actors were not Chinese. Okay, that even if the character was Chinese, the actor wasn't Chinese. You may have seen the film The Good Earth, okay, which is based on the book, and great story, but the main lead isn't Chinese at the end of the day. And this goes back to Hollywood's whole thing of, we don't believe that we can sell this story about a Chinese lead with a Chinese lead. We got to do something else at the end of the day. Mind you, they never tried. They never tried, so they didn't know about it. But again, that goes into the whole thing with Hollywood just trying to edge their bet, making certain, look, we want to make certain we get our money back as we play this on it. So, they go into this particular article, and this reads like somebody who just came out of a minority studies course in the freshman or sophomore year of university, where now they overanalyze everything. Oh, look at this armor. Look at that cape. Look at this face mask. Look at this. Look at that. And it's like, hold on. These are the things that you're identifying. Is everything that you're identifying in the same in that category? Does it bear scrutiny? If you're going to say that Darth Vader, okay, is based on the whole idea of Japanese literally the Japanese armor and so on and so forth, well, then you got to do your diligence. Are there any other, societies or cultures that also wear armor that would also fit this particular bill? And if you're saying that they based it on the Japanese, that's fine. But why is there a racial connotation when it's based on something Japanese as opposed to another culture if they have the same exact thing? You're doing a confirmation bias on this stuff, okay? You're embracing the victimology that is too prevalent in the country, okay? Much too far at the end of the day. And you undermine your own argument because you're not doing what you're supposed to do after you've taken these 101 courses. You take the 202 course, which teaches you proper analysis. So you can actually weed out the stuff that's there as opposed to you just, hey, I found something over here. And that way I can just add it to the pile. And now I can say I'm a headhunter.
I don't necessarily disagree with this article. I think that there's been definitely people in the Asian community have felt that some of the stereotypical views of Fu Manchu, and when it was originally created back in the late 1900s, not 1913, that the character was depicted as being racist. Marvel licensed the character. Remember that. So they didn't even develop it. They just used that character because they figured, hey, this would be a good foil for Shang-Chi, and that's what they did. So we're not, we have to understand the story. Yes, the story from the comics, which you guys understand, is a bit different. But there's a lot of history related to this particular Fu Manchu character, which a lot of people felt very strong about and felt depicted or even slandered the Asian community. And I don't think that's wrong. If you feel that this is something that, and there's a lot of people feel about a lot of different things, that if you can help to explain why you feel this particular character does not, or the name of this particular character does not help a community or hurts a community or slanders a community, I think it's justifiable that you'd want to have that name changed. And that's what they've done over time. Fu Manchu they felt was a character that would not fly, or at least the name of it, and definitely wouldn't fly in China in and of itself. So they were sensitive enough for them to say, "Hey, let's change it a little bit." The Mandarin, where some people still have some ideas about that, or not exactly, but that's a much more acceptable character overall. The very fact that many of these characters were played by.
Wait a second. The Mandarin is not acceptable. They said no to the Mandarin in Iron Man 3. Now he can't be acceptable.
They brought him back, so they did. They made him
unacceptable.
I mean, you see the way they did the ancient one, where they decided to be politically correct and not put an ancient. They thought it would be too obvious to put an ancient, an older Asian gentleman. They gave it to a woman instead, which caused a lot of controversy. That's been rolled back by Feige. He's like, yeah, probably that was not the best idea we had.
Yeah, because you're going to Tibet, okay, and you're going to Tibet, and where are you finding? You're finding this Celtic chick over here who's the ancient one. They, of course, when they came up with that idea, they were thinking, oh, this would be great. We put a woman in the role, and we're being progressive. Only that it makes no sense. Okay, it makes no sense that this person necessarily would be the ancient one as the oldest person there if it's in Tibet. If they're going to have somebody long live, it would probably be somebody Tibetan in that particular area and not somebody else. So they dropped, they definitely dropped the ball with that one. Here, they dropped the ball with not understanding a good character, okay, who's been depicted in a manner that's offensive, but somebody that you could actually still use, especially since it's a villain character at the end of the day. That's one. And two, the idea that Shang-Chi has these racist origins, they never read a Shang-Chi comic. How can you legitimately have that title for the article and then go into all of this breakdown, which has almost nothing to do with Shang-Chi whatsoever, except to turn it into a grievance piece?
I have to agree with you. You're right. It doesn't really touch on the Shang-Chi itself as opposed to touching on other aspects of the history of things that have happened in the past. And the same thing goes with which really is a Fu Manchu article they're really going after. But look, I kind of agree with you there. That there's nothing cool. You're right about that. But again, the Fu Manchu character is something that's been problematic, and many people of Asian descent have found it difficult to bear. And so to remove them, I have no problems with that. There are millions of other characters, thousands of other characters that you can utilize. Why not? If you find that the character is particularly problematic for a different community, you can have someone have similar history and stuff, change the name.
Because you don't deal with the history that way. You avoid the history, or you just try to erase it, which has never worked at the end of the day. I think I was talking with I was talking with Petey about this the other day with Tarzan films. Okay, that I grew up watching them, I enjoy them, so on and so forth. But the biggest problem that you have with them are the racial depictions of Africans in those films.
Big time.
Okay? The biggest problem that everybody would, the racial depiction. And mind you, I've seen enough of those films to say, okay, not every Tarzan film was like that. You actually have to watch them to see, okay, fine, this is where, yeah, these guys are definitely going over the line. And this over here is like, no, this is just a Tarzan movie, and they're definitely Africans in the movie, but no different than anybody else, at the end of the day. So there is something to be said for that as well. But now you would have people say, no, we can't do a Tarzan movie. We got to throw that out because Tarzan has these racist origins and so on and so forth, rather than, okay, what was the racist, or what was the racism that people are decrying over here? Is this character still viable? Okay, if we just take that out, not the character, but the racist aspects of what was going on. Oh, yeah, you can do that. You make a movie called The Legend of Tarzan. Okay, it does well at the box office, and you still have a viable property at the end of the day. You have a viable property that's still going under that trophy of the white savior trophy at the end of the day. You can still do it because the story, okay, is still going to be tantamount to what people are going to be interested in, and not perking their eyes up for looking for, let's see if we can find this or that. Fu Manchu, that may be what, in my opinion, I believe that Fu Manchu is a character that you could do that with. However, okay, they're saying no, this character is just too radioactive for even to touch at the end of the day. But the Mandarin, that's cool. And what do they want to do with the Mandarin? They're not even doing that character. They're just taking the name. All right, they're literally just taking the name, and then what are we going with? We're going with stock Asian villain. We're going with stock Asian villain. Okay, what is he? He's the head of some, he's the head of some evil corporation or something, like they were during the 90s when the Japanese were supposed to come over here and take over everything, thanks to Rockefeller Center. Okay, and that was how the whole thing was supposed to work. That's acceptable. Okay, that's acceptable. Now, if that's acceptable, then you got to ask, what's the problem? What's the problem with the other guy? Is it that this is really offensive, okay? Or is it the portrayal? Because if it's the portrayal, you can always change the portrayal, and the motivations of the character still work. Lastly, it wasn't that Marvel stopped using Fu Manchu. They lost the rights to Fu Manchu. They lost the rights in 1983. So in 1983, they no longer had the rights. The guys who own it decided they weren't going to re-up with Marvel, and that was pretty much the end of it. I believe they lost the rights to Fu Manchu because of the Destroyer movie that came out, The Adventures of Remo Williams. And I think that's where that's one of the reasons why they lost it, because of that movie that was coming out. But Marvel moved forward with the whole thing. Okay, they retconned Shang-Chi's origin, not because they wanted to, Fu Manchu is a horrible character. They no longer had the rights to the character, so they couldn't use him. And then they moved on, and Fu Manchu's doing whatever the heck he's doing right now. But the idea is that, there's a lot of depictions of characters, a whole bunch of characters, even my favorite character, doing things almost 100 years ago that wouldn't necessarily be socially acceptable right now, but it was okay then. You change the portrayal, okay, after you have some more understanding. When you're a kid, you can do childish things. You grow up, you move away from that, you act accordingly, and then you can actually see if this is something, no, this is just something that we can't do, okay, or is it something that we change the portrayal? Because if you're saying that, no, we can't do something, but we have a villain that's pretty much doing exactly the same thing, then it's a little bit schizophrenic for me at the end of the day.
Well, I think in this article, they kind of they want to try to describe what the Mandarin's like and how different it is. But it's like you have to accept that Marvel kind of or Disney or Marvel, they kind of just decided that they went through the same problem that the Fu Manchu and all the other Dr. No, all those other characters went through. Every time you see them, it's some white guy playing it. So it's like saying, Now wait a second, because everyone at first was like, okay, yeah, they're pulling out all of the offensive characters. Thank you. They're doing us a service. And the next thing was like, well, wait a second. Not the ancient one? No, the ancient one's offensive. How? Well, it's a mystic and he's Asian and okay, well why can't that be an Asian person? No, we don't want an offensive character because that's all people would say. Oh, hey, Shang-Chi, they wouldn't talk about the character. They talk about Fu Manchu when you didn't have to do a story about that. You can, I mean, basically, even though there's a lot of martial arts in the comic book of Master, it's like he's more like an agent, like a James Bond of his own. So it's like you can't.
He works with Interpol.
So you don't have to fall into just saying, all right, he has to fight. He has to fight. Well, then that doesn't even make sense. He fights characters in Asian outfit. It's just cool. Like there's not like in the whole sort of different sort of like a martial art thing. Like he fights characters like that. It's not offensive. It's cool having him fight these characters with some of the cool stuff we see in the karate movies. So like going into it, this article isn't saying, hey, Marvel went away, in trying to destroy its own. And this is part 1 of 3. Like, what else are they going to do for this thing? It's not like they already started on the bad way. And it's like, what are they going to do? We're going to explain how Marvel got this. It's like, ooh, like wait till episode 2. It's like, you already messed up in episode. Well, I guess they'll explain it. Anything that people write back, they'll write it into the next one. It's like, see, you didn't wait for episode 2 of our thing, article 2 of our thing, where we explain this stuff. It's like, no, you look at this. Shang-Chi's a positive character. Marvel, in trying to destroy it, was trying to avoid it altogether. And at the same time, the Mandarin himself wasn't, the Mandarin just has a great type name. He just didn't have a great costume. He was just a stock villain. And it was like one of the early, you had villains that looked pretty good, like the Titanium Man and Crimson Dynamo, but the initial costume that they gave the Mandarin isn't necessarily like a stock sort of Asian villain. It's just a wacky sort of costume, which they gave him armor later. And then you have the Jim Lee outfit that they gave him. So, and I think John Romita gave him the robes. But now in this article, you can't even put an Asian character in sort of robes. And it's like, hey, they got robes on, offensive. Like, well, come on.
I don't think they get what offensive is. If you ever saw any of these older Jerry Lewis movies, and he would have these glasses on and his teeth really pronounced, and he's making this mocking accent of like somebody who's it was a Japanese caricature of somebody Japanese trying to speak English, that type of stuff. Or even if you saw the movie with the Bruce Lee movie Dragon, Legend of Bruce Lee, with Jason Scott Lee, when he's sitting in the movie theater, and his date, who's going to be his wife, is watching, and she's cracking up laughing, and he's looking at it, and he's like, why is this funny? What's funny about this? And then they end up both leaving the movie theater. Those are offensive.
Yeah.
Okay, without a doubt, those are offensive because those strike to the heart. Those really strike to the heart of the people. At the end of the day, there's nothing to do. There's no corrective for that because you're belittling that person. You're putting that person down. You're taking shots at them. And it's not exclusive to any one demographic in this particular country. Everybody's gotten a shot. People think, no, that's not the case. No, do your research. You'll find out that is. More so, maybe, more so one group than another, but it's prevalent throughout the history of this, at least with the states. That right over there is the stuff that you don't want to see. You don't want to see somebody caricaturized or put down. Those type of things you don't want to see. But you have to be able to distinctly identify influence, okay, as opposed to insult. And these guys don't necessarily do it in this particular article. And lopping in Shang-Chi, who is an incredibly positive character that none of these guys even cared about until he had a movie, and to try to say that he had racist origins is really insulting to where this character comes from, especially for me as such a big proponent of Bruce Lee, because he comes from Bruce Lee, and there was nothing but positivity that came from Bruce Lee.
I don't think they're targeting Shang-Chi. They're doing it more with the Fu Manchu.
He's in the but they've got his name in the title.
I
And they're
know they
talking
have
about
it.
Shang-Chi's racist origin. If you want to do an article on Fu Manchu, too, go right ahead. Okay, but that's not Shang-Chi, and that means again, that's a sensationalist title at the end of the day, and it speaks into the same thing. If it's non-white, especially in the States, must have had some sort of racist origin at the end of the day. That's not Shang-Chi.
So I guess anything else you have to say about this, PD?
I'm dreading parts 2 and part 3 of this article.
When we see the movie, which has gotten rave reviews, we will see a different take on it. Okay. Well, hey, that's all we got to talk about. Oh, nothing else.
What does that have to do with what we're talking about?
I'm just saying, in terms of your interpretation, that how they're going through some of the stuff. I think, yes, I agree with you that Fu Manchu is a difficult subject to discuss. I think that there are people who feel that particular character should be removed. Yes, we've seen some of this happen from the beginning of Black Panther, where the subject matter, the way some of that stuff is dealt with initially was considered offensive by some, and they've changed it as time has gone by. We understand that.
What did you just say?
Offensive by some,
The Mandarin?
No, he said Black Panther.
Well, Black Panther was a.
Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about.
Initially, So look,
what stuff with Black Panther was thought to be offensive?
The way they were called. What's the name of the book it came out? Jungle. What's the saying again? Jungle.
Black Panther, but Black Panther.
I'm just saying, some people felt that why are they saying that for at the time? But hey, you're right.
Why was it called Jungle Action?
Yeah,
it was called Jungle Action before he was in there.
Okay, I'm just saying that's what some people brought up.
A bunch of idiots. That's a genre. That's a genre.
We can discuss that again.
A bunch of idiots.
So here,
I can't deal with this negativity. I'm out.
The guy who brought this all up.
This ignorance. Out.
Out.
And OUT